For a Year 10 science unit, again, this was a test, so to speak, but the booklet, rather than looking like just the traditional blank, boring, here's your questions, here's your cover sheet, the booklet was designed to simulate sort of an operator's manual. So again, there was a scenario, there was a step-by-step storyline, so we're telling a story in an assessment, and in this case, students were flying off into space, they're going to land on Mars, and then they had to get back. And this is basically the emergency response book. So at each section of the test, it would say, turn to page 1, you're now doing this. And it's designed to simulate that guide. Again, it's not super authentic. They're not going to believe that they're in space, but it's very different to just the blank paper that they definitely believe they're doing a test. So the more we can distract from that, the more we can make it engaging, then we're going to create a more immersive assessment and more engagement in our classes. We'll see similar things. The operator's name versus student name, just simple things like operator's name. The rank, again, we've got from before. And then you'll see that, again, I'm using the stages versus questions. I'm using stages and steps to simulate. In this case, it was that manual. So it would be a step 1, do this. Step 2, do this. I've got some of my arrows to indicate directions. I've got some pictures and things to break it up. But it's also telling the story. So this is plotting the course. This is the booklet that students had. But what does it look like on the screen? What's the added piece to create that story and that immersion? Well, this is what it looked like when we first started the test.
And ECL, I'm standing by for step 944 next. Copy that.
So in this case, this is their prompt. They see the intro that creates, oh, are we watching a movie or are we doing a test? And then it transitions to commence pre-flight checks. So we're telling the story and the prompt is to turn to page 1. You don't have to do this style or this strategy within this type of assessment, but what I did for this task is that every section of that booklet / the test has a set amount of time and students couldn't progress beyond that. So in this case, it turned to page 1 and it gave them 10 minutes, but the sections of following that, like section 2, there wasn't enough information in the question for them to go ahead. That information was actually on the slides that will appear once this timer runs out. The reason for that is so that students know more accurately how they're trekking for time, but we're creating more strict constraints for each section to give them a guide of this should take you 10 minutes. And if they're a little bit behind, they can still catch up, but they know by section 2 that they're a little bit behind. The feedback I got from students was that they actually liked this. I had nearly all of my students said that they preferred this style because they knew where they were trekking. You don't have that case of they're halfway through the test and someone else gets up and hands in a test and they freak out because they think they're miles behind. So I regulated what they could do in each section. You don't have to do that. It depends on your class and your style. After section 1 was complete, it transitions into section 2. You can now see here's the data on the screen that they needed to answer their questions. And we've got the second timer. So chapter 2 has 10 minutes as well. I've done the same thing. I've created a bit of a scenario. I've got a big picture on the screen to represent the story. I've got some subtle background music. In this case, I think it's sort of a bunch of digital sounds and then it starts to do breathing because this was the bit where they're on space driving the rover. But this is one way that you could do a test, so to speak. So you've still got your booklet, but you're adding a digital component to it to create that immersion and tell a story throughout an assessment. It also then links back to that it's application-based. They're using the questions in a context to help make that link of why would I need that or what would I use this information for.